who are darker than blue. Don't let us hang around this town and let what others say come true. We're just good for nothing, they all figure. A boy's grown up shit.
Peace, everybody who is listening on WPFW, everybody who's watching on Black Liberation Media on YouTube, Facebook, Luke Mon Nation on Facebook, or Luke Mon Nation on Instagram. This is Darker Than Blue, the show where we talk about politics for the people you just heard Brother Curtis Mayfield say are darker than blue. That's me and you, y'all. I'm Jackie Lukeman, and I am glad we're back this week because we got to finish our discussion about what's going on in DC right now with this so-called takeover in relation to the history of repression that we have always lived under in this city. Now, I talked last week about how policies passed by Ronald Reagan that began the destabilization of our neighborhoods to make them easier to be overrun by the crack epidemic that he made happen later. We started talking about that last week. I talked about my mom and I joining our neighborhood watch group, seeing all the white suburbanites from Maryland, Virginia, Delaware, Pennsylvania drive through our little community on a back street, off a back street, off a side street, off a major street, right? Looking for drugs, but they got to drive home, right? They got to leave our neighborhoods and go home. All the people who came into our neighborhood looking for crack, most of them were not Black. Most of them were white. They got to go home. But our kids, our people were locked up en masse. So now we have to talk about the other way that Ronald Reagan's racist policies continued to cripple our communities with the sentencing disparities for crack versus powdered cocaine possession in his legislation. We all start with the omnibus crime bill of 1994 that was written by Joe Biden and co-sponsored, I think, and signed by Bernie Sanders. And so Sanders, of course, says, "Yeah, I didn't like it. I didn't like the provisions in it, but I signed it because of the legislation protecting women suffering domestic abuse that was tacked onto the legislation." And that's kind of the way that politicians pass really harmful legislation, but they make an excuse for supporting it by saying, "Oh, well, there was another amendment that was added to it that really speaks to this important issue," which gives us basically a poop sandwich in legislation, because we get this horrible legislation like the 94 crime bill that did so much incredible damage to specific groups of people. But then we're supposed to give people a pass because somebody realized that the only way politicians were going to vote for that crappy piece of legislation is to stick a bunch of other amendments on it that they like, and then tell them, well, the only way you're going to get these amendments passed is if you vote for this legislation. And none of these people have the courage to stand up and say, "Nope, not doing that, not doing it. We can fight for these issues all alone without throwing an entire community or two or four of people under the bus." So you get what you want, which is the degradation and the humiliation and the criminalization and sometimes the outright murder of those people that you wrote this legislation to hurt in the first place. Everybody always starts with correctly criticizing Joe Biden for the 1994 crime bill. But we need to understand that the disparity in powder and crack cocaine sentencing, Reagan started this, I think, with his Anti-Drug Abuse Act that was passed in 1980. 1986, y'all. Mass incarceration of Black men skyrocketed during this time because of this law. And the skyrocketing was so intense that this is pretty much the moment in time, almost to the date, when the prison population in the United States began to change from predominantly white to predominantly Black and Chicano, right? Ronald Reagan is the person we can thank for that, through his 1986 Anti-Drug Abuse Act. And let's not forget that it was the Reagan administration that had the CIA involved in trafficking cocaine in the first place, using the illicit profits from the sale of more cocaine than the cartels had ever shipped over here to buy weapons for the Contras, to destroy the socialist Sandinistas and end their revolution in Nicaragua. Now, although that plan failed, the emergence of crack cocaine in our communities was and continues to be a crime that Reagan and his cabal have never been held to account for. But the horror it created for us was blamed on us, and it's still used to justify racist, tough on crime rhetoric and policies, like what's used to justify the current occupation of DC to punish the same group of people, us. Working class, poor folks in Southeast and Northeast DC, and increasingly the immigrant community here. What's not told about this history and our fight for our people and our communities through this history is that we asked for everything that was taken from and destabilized our communities to be restored. We understood that sadly, some of our people did have to be removed from this society because some did commit horrible acts of violence against someone else. We have never shied away from that truth. But that was not what most of our people were actually locked up for. Most of the people in our communities were not locked up for murder. Most of them were not locked up for violent offenses. Most of our people were imprisoned for simple drug possession, not even distribution, possession. But see, the drug was crack, which got them longer prison sentences than if they had been caught with powdered cocaine, and a lot more powdered cocaine, by the way. And they got a permanent felony record that caged them in a barren society, separated from opportunities for the rest of their lives. It's long been known that poverty is the link to increased intracommunal crime. We knew this because we were living through it. And the way that statistics have historically been used to create the narrative about Black criminality that was then and still is used to avoid addressing the known root of intracommunal crime, which is poverty, and demonize Black people to maintain our oppression is actually very well documented in a book written by Khalil Gibran Muhammad in 2010 called The Condemnation of Blackness, Race, Crime, and the Making of Modern America. See, Muhammad exposes in this book the history of what Mary F. Corey, in her review of the book, calls, quote, the statistical lynching of Black Americans by a mob of social scientists, end quote. And we experienced that statistical lynching when we asked repeatedly in town halls hosted by politicians, in public meetings held by the police, in front of news cameras, appealing to whoever was listening that we needed the infrastructure back of the community programs, good paying jobs, decent affordable housing, fully funded public education, in school and after school programs, summer jobs for our kids, mental health and addiction services, all things that were taken from us by the Reagan administration that dropped us into the bottomless pit of the crater of crack. We knew what we needed to get out of it. But what we got was condemnation about the criminality of Black youth, just like Khalil Gibran Muhammad explains in his book. And we got more police with more and more military hardware in our neighborhoods, more arrests, longer prison sentences for simple possession, more racist condemnation of our kids, our men, our women, our communities, our criminality. And eventually, the National Guard was deployed to our communities. Yes, y'all, it has been done before. Trump did it. I told you this is not new. Because, see, in 1989, President George H.W. Bush had the idea. Well, he says this wasn't his idea, but he asked the DEA, hey, can y'all get me a bag of crack? That's what he said he asked them. What the DEA did, however, was to lure a Black teenager to the White House so they could buy a little baggie of crack from him that Bush used as a prop in his first televised address to the nation to announce his new chapter in the war on drugs, despite the fact that drug activity and the violence associated with it was already declining by 1989. Bush deployed the National Guard to areas of Southeast and Northeast DC anyway to respond to violent crime from DC's drug culture. Now, this was not welcomed by then Mayor Marion Barry. Contradictions included. He didn't like this, who, along with the police chief at the time, who I think was Peter Newsham, and the head of the DC National Guard, I do not remember his name right now, they all three held a press conference and made it very clear that they didn't like this move by Bush. They recognized they had no authority to reject it, but they said the mayor of DC, the police chief of DC, and the chief of the DC National Guard said that the Guard would not be allowed to patrol the streets or make arrests. Compare that to the response of the current mayor, Mayor Muriel Bowser, to Trump's deploying the National Guard here. Her response has not been as resolutely against what they've done and in defense of the people of DC, not like Barry and Newsham and the chief of the DC National Guard's response was back in 1989. Now, I will admit that the Trump administration's deployment of the National Guard in DC now is definitely different from the National Guard's role in the city back in 1989, because today the National Guard is empowered to patrol and arrest. And now I think the Attorney General, former a reality show host, former Fox News contributor, Jeanine Pirro, has said that the National Guard is now going to be armed, because they were not armed until the announcement was made, I believe. And back in 1989, the National Guard was not armed. But so far, what I've seen from the National Guard here in DC is that they have acted almost like backup for the already oppressive Metropolitan Police Department that continues stop and frisk style actions that they've been doing for a while. Now, the checkpoints that the Guard and the other law enforcement agencies have set up to basically illegally search people's cars and make up a reason to arrest people. These checkpoints are new, but the racial profiling, the oppressive policing, the harsh treatment for low-level, non-violent misdemeanor offenses, or, just making stuff up, and the racist rhetoric of rampant Black criminal youth used to justify all of it, it is all the same. It's the same stuff we were told and heard, and it's the same way we were treated back in 1989 by the politicians. But the racist oppression and denial of self-determination of DC's Black residents, that's a much deeper part of this city's history that goes beyond modern tough on crime narrative. And it actually reflects America's relationship with the descendants of the stolen Africans forcefully brought to this stolen land. Because after the Civil War ended in 1865, DC became a destination for tens of thousands of formerly enslaved people from the near southern states. Southern senators, still angry at losing the war, losing slavery, losing their property, they ended Washington's self-governance. Washington was a self-governed entity before the end of the Civil War. And after the Civil War, the Southern congressmen, the Southern senators were like, nope, nope, the Blacks are moving into Washington, D.C. So now we have to take their rights away because we don't want the Blacks. We don't want, and you know they did not call us Black, but you know what I mean. The Southern senators who were angry because they lost the Civil War. This was their payback. A part of their payback, because the destruction of Reconstruction really was the payback. But they ended Washington's self-governance to keep the new, formerly enslaved, newly liberated Black residents from having any political access, even though by 1870, the city had extended voting rights to everybody, regardless of race. When white supremacist forces violently ended Reconstruction throughout the South, the district was also taken over by white supremacists who moved to keep political power from Black residents even more. In 1890, the former Confederate general, plantation owner, and Democratic senator, John Tyler Morgan of Alabama, explained on the Senate floor why DC could not be allowed to govern its affairs. Now, the historical fact is simply this, that the Negroes came into this district from Virginia, from Maryland, and from other places. They came in here and they took possession of a certain part of the political power of this district. There was but one way to get out, so Congress thought, so this able committee thought, and that was to deny the right of suffrage entirely to every human being in the district and have every office here controlled by appointment instead of by election in order to get rid of this load of Negro suffrage that was flooded in upon them, end quote. And he was not alone in his sentiments. The ongoing history of political antagonism, political racist antagonism toward Black DC residents is also evident among 20th century politicians like Pat Buchanan, remember him, who said in the 1970s that giving DC representation in Congress would be akin to an affirmative action program. And you know that no conservative has ever used that phrase, affirmative action, to mean anything positive. But Washington, D.C. finally achieved home rule in 1973. And while this finally ended the congressional practice of appointing white male city managers to govern D.C., and allowed DC residents to elect its city government, DC still did not have complete autonomy over it. The US Constitution, in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17, stipulates that laws passed by the district's city council and the city's budget must be reviewed and approved by Congress. We had a city council before, but we just did not elect them, right? But every decision that was made had to be approved by Congress. And the Home Rule Act of 1973 did not overturn this requirement, and the requirement remains in effect today. And in keeping with the racist sentiments of conservative politicians, DC still does not have voting representation in Congress, but we still pay federal taxes. This is why we have bumper stickers that say, or not bumper stickers, license plates that say taxation without representation, which is supposed to be illegal. But we are talking about a white supremacist, patriarchal, settler colony here. So legality on the foundation of inhuman morality, amorality, and genocide, yeah, that's a big old gray area. And this is something that a lot of people also don't know about DC. Dozens, like I think 38, almost 40 federal law enforcement agencies besides the Metropolitan Police Department operate in Washington, D.C., with jurisdiction to arrest in various locations throughout the city and some of the close-in suburbs, which are not limited to the area of the agency's headquarters. So what I mean is that, like, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, has its own police department, its own police force. And they're not like security, like mall security. No, they are federalized police, armed with arrest authority. Every federal agency that exists in this city has its own federal police force. And that federal police force has the authority to arrest people at any location that is a part of the inventory of that agency. So the HUD police can arrest people at HUD headquarters, which is somewhere on H Street, I think it is, in Northeast DC. But if HUD has offices in other areas of the city, those offices, those HUD satellite offices, are HUD locations. So guess what? The HUD federal police has jurisdiction to arrest us at all of the HUD satellite offices, regardless of where they are in the city or even in the suburbs of Maryland or Virginia, and that might not be true, specifically of HUD. I'm just giving you that example as the way this works with these federal agencies having jurisdiction to arrest DC residents basically anywhere the agency says they do. And that's pretty much the whole city almost, because over here in Southeast DC, I see the Park Police, Transit Police, Secret Service Police, FBI security forces, the protective, what are they called? The protective security force. Yeah, it's a whole bunch. It's 38 of them. And you don't even have to be outside for a long time to see a bunch of big black sedans with the name of some a federal agency that represents a police force for that agency that you didn't even know existed. 38 of them. And I think those are just the ones they tell us about, to tell you the truth, because yeah, there are other alphabet agencies that are part of the surveillance state that you don't know nothing about. Yeah, that's a lot. Okay, so Washington, D.C., to be clear, dear listeners and dear viewers, Washington, D.C. has never, except for before the Civil War, Washington, D.C. has never not been controlled by Congress. And its residents have been under the jurisdiction of various federal law enforcement agencies for decades. So for me, and I know people are going to take issue with this, but I'm just telling you this from my experience, from my perspective, from this history that I know to be true, and from the history I have lived in this city, it's difficult for me to see how Trump's takeover of DC really is a takeover of DC when we don't control DC in the first place. So who is he taking it over from? Congress that already has final say and veto power over our affairs? Yeah. But then there's another aspect of this that I think is very, very important, because in an almost obscene twist, and this is something that not enough people are talking about for me, so this is, of course, why I have to talk about it. And I know people are going to be mad at me, but you know what? I'm used to it, and that's okay. I take that as a badge of honor. I must be doing something right if I have made somebody mad because I have told you the truth that you did not want to hear. In many cities today, with Black mayors and large Black and working class or poor populations like Washington, D.C., the oppression of those largely Black working class and poor and immigrant and other residents is carried out more directly through neoliberal policies imposed by those Black Democrats who uphold the same racist, tough on crime rhetoric that white conservatives cooked up and used against us, cooked up about us and used against us all this time. Working class and poor DC residents have struggled under Muriel Bowser's administration and her contempt for the poor compared to her allegiance to the capitalist class for years. We have watched this woman clear out one of the, well, basically the last public housing development in the city, Barry Farms, and practically give that land to private developers for almost nothing. And where are all of those working class and poor residents? They can't afford to live in this city, I can tell you that. And that's exactly what they want. She requested, Muriel Bowser did. We want to talk about deploying the National Guard? Okay, let's talk about it. Because Muriel Bowser requested that the National Guard be deployed to clear people from Lafayette Square Park in the George Floyd protests of 2020. And then she complained publicly when the Attorney General refused to criminally charge and prosecute some of the people who were arrested in those protester sweeps, to which the Attorney General responded that the police at the time and whatever law enforcement agency and this exchange, by the way, took place on Twitter. Yeah, Muriel Bowser tweeted the letter that she sent to the AG saying a bunch of these protesters were arrested for rioting and destroying property. Why did you not prosecute them? Shame on you for not locking these people up. And the AG responded also on Twitter with their letter sent to Bowser in response to her complaint, telling her that Metropolitan Police, when they arrested these people and referred them for prosecution, did not provide evidence that supported the charges. So Bowser and members of the city council continued to complain about the protesters who were not prosecuted. And it was weird because even the Attorney General was like bragging in the letter about how many protesters they did prosecute. So these are people, Muriel Bowser and the city council, who have consistently given Metropolitan Police over $500 million every year to oppress working class and poor residents through police occupation, over policing our neighborhoods, brutality, and police murder. She has not met a police murder that she has not supported. There has not been an instance of the police killing someone in this city that Muriel Bowser has not stood up and said, this is unconscionable, this needs to stop. There needs to be a change with policing in this city. As a matter of fact, when the big push to do something about policing happened in 2020, Her response was, we need to slow down on these reforms of MPD. And she gave them another $500 million in their budget. Right now, the budget for the Metropolitan Police Department in DC is $574 million and some change. $500 million. Yeah. She has repeatedly, Muriel Bowser, directed Metropolitan Police Department and the DC Department of Public Works to clear homeless encampments throughout the city with no guarantee of housing for everyone displaced and no economic relief for those who are employed and homeless. And they're homeless because they don't make enough money to afford housing in DC. So when people are, yes, it's horrible seeing the National Guard now helping MPD and Department of Public Works destroy people's property, throw tents and people's possessions into dump trucks and disappear those people off the street somewhere. I am telling you that Muriel Bowser has been doing that all this time before the National Guard was deployed under Trump. MPD and DPW were doing those things in exactly the same way you have seen them done, with now the National Guard kind of standing on the sidelines looking. That has been happening in this city. And the criminalization of Black youth and the poor, that's been going on under Bowser all this time as well, particularly when we talk about legislation like the DC crime bill that was recently passed, again, before Trump, that increased penalties for carjacking, which was already on the decline, but it's targeting Black youth. That criminalized fair jumping, which largely targets Black youth. And that I think there are some offenses that have been added that can cause youth to be charged as adults. Now, the reason this this legislation was changed to include these harsher penalties is because when the bill was being reviewed, because it is literally 100-something years old, there were very confusing, unclear, outdated terms for things that just literally don't exist anymore, and some offenses, some charges needed to be clarified, like some charges needed to be broken out into first degree, second degree, or third degree level offenses, which is typical for most laws. Fox News somehow got a hold of this. Well, what do I mean somehow? Some conservative in Congress called Fox News and said, we need to stop DC from taking the boot off the neck of their young Black citizens. So Fox News turned the revisions of the crime bill into this big Democrat liberal plot to help the criminal Black youth get away with crime. The whole story was cooked up and turned into this narrative of, see, these Black mayors are soft on crime when it comes to their people. And instead of pushing back on that foolishness with the truth, with facts, what did she do? Well, she did what we're doing now. No, crime is down. No, this is this. Oh no, please understand all this. No, we have to stop being polite and trying to reason with these people. Because it's not like they twisted her arm to make her put the more repressive legislation into the bill. She was going to do that anyway, because that was the discussion we were having as the city council was considering what to change in the bill. In all of the public meetings that the council had for the public to come in and talk about the bill, we learned then that they had always intended, to increase the penalties for some crimes, to make other civil offenses or misdemeanors felonies. And they knew that they were going to do that to, quote unquote, target youth crime. And this is the Democrats now in DC telling the citizens this. So Fox News hopped onto a story that was a controversy for us long before they got the tip. And they created a false narrative of Democrats in DC being, being soft on crime to fit their narrative, and it was their narrative, because they had to help Trump continue his, these S-hole cities that we need to clean up, and the things he said about DC in his first administration. This is not some random thing he decided to get up and do a few mornings ago. He was talking about taking over DC in his first administration. So, of course, the conservatives had to create a reason for them to actually carry it through. But they didn't have to. They really didn't have to create a reason and lie about it, because Muriel Bowser and the Democrats were already going to do their dirty work for them. So Muriel Bowser has already carried out the criminalization of Black youth and the poor. That's been a constant feature of her administration in this city, and organizers like myself and our comrades at Pan-African Community Action, Black Lives Matter DC, other organizations, Malcolm X grassroots movement, obviously Black Alliance for Peace DC, faith organizations have been fighting with the Bowser administration for her refusal to even be decent to the working class and poor residents of this city. So please, y'all, do not count the current DC mayor, Muriel Bowser, among Trump's takeover victims. His blatant racism and authoritarianism does not negate Muriel Bowser's blatant class antagonism toward the working class and poor, and her authoritarianism toward the youth. That's right, I said what I said, her authoritarianism. Because as much as we want to think that Trump is uniquely and solely responsible for this very frightening moment that we are in, this very dangerous moment that we are in, I am trying so hard to impress upon people that when Trump goes away, however he does, whenever he does, and when the National Guard leave DC, however they do, whenever they do, they will, what are we going to do about the system that remains? That's the issue. That is the point. It's okay, fine. We want to talk about how Trump is an authoritarian and how Trump is a fascist and how Trump is racist and how, yeah, all those things are true. I'm not even saying that they're not. Never have. I have just been very confused about why people only want me to talk about Trump, as if all of our problems started the day he won the first election and our problems got worse when he won the second. That is just not true. And for those of us who have lived in this city and lived through this history that I am telling you, lived through George H.W. Bush deploying the National Guard to Washington, D.C., walked in my neighborhood with the National Guard posted up on the corner with the gigantic, really, really bright Klieg lights. I grew up in that. I went to school many days walking past National Guardsmen who, again, remember, it was a different kind of deployment then. They were not armed. They were not patrolling. They weren't helping MPD do anything. MPD was still doing all of the brutalization, and they still are. It's just that now the National Guard is providing backup for them. And soon the National Guard probably will be a lot more proactive in what they are doing. They will probably start detaining and arresting people. I'm sure it's coming. But let's stop acting as if a militarized response to this racist lie of Black criminality that even liberals and Black liberals have latched onto and have exposed their gross class hatred, their hatred of working class and poor Black people who are their constituents. Let's stop acting like our problems began with Trump. They did not. It is absolutely true that Trump's initial deployment of the National Guard here to DC, it's not unprecedented. Words do have meanings. It has been done before. Instead, I argue that what Trump is doing is an escalation. And I've heard people say this also, that, Trump is escalating things. Okay, that's great. You're right. But they never talk about what he is escalating from, who he is escalating from, what things are he escalating. And if things are being escalated, what was the state of those things before he escalated them? That's the part of this thing that people don't talk about when they say, okay, fine, it's not new, but he is escalating things. Okay, yes, I agree. But what is he escalating? And I argue that Trump is escalating an ongoing war against Black working class and poor people carried out over centuries by both political parties and supported by much of America because of the incessant racist rhetoric about Black crime that they continue to be fed. It's so pervasive that some of us actually believe it too. That's why some of us are celebrating the National Guard locking our people up. Now, while this is frightening, a threat to the safety of our youth in particular, an attack on our very limited sovereignty, and a test case for what Trump plans to do in other cities. And I think I just saw a little earlier that he plans to roll this out in Chicago next. I argue that we must be clear that history and the material realities we live reveal that Trump did not have to do much to escalate what was already a violently undemocratic and oppressive police state. That's what DC has been for us on this side of the river, east of the river. The ongoing war against Black, poor, marginalized people that Trump has escalated will not end when he and or the National Guard leave. So the focus must be on how the people win this long war, how we win this protracted war against us that every politician of both political parties participates in and continues. How do the people win this war and destroy the system that makes all of this possible? That is what I think our focus needs to be, because if it's not, dear listeners and dear viewers, if we only focus on getting rid of Trump right now, and if somehow we are able to convince Trump to pack up and leave, let's just throw this out there as a big old what if. What if we were able to pull together a protest demonstration so massive, so terrifying, so jarring to Trump that he has to run from DC. He didn't realize we had that much fight. He didn't know that the blacks in DC had that much solidarity, and he gonna have to leave. And he leaves Washington, packs up, leaves in the middle of the night, like the Baltimore Colts left to go to Indianapolis. Y'all remember that? Uh-huh. In the middle of the night with a U-Haul truck. Okay. What if that happens? And then something happens and we're able to run all the conservatives out of Congress. We vote them all out of office in the midterms, and all the Republicans lose their seats. And all of the Republicans are replaced with Democrats. And now Congress is almost 100% Democrat, and the next president is a Democrat. And then the Democrat has a supermajority in Congress. What changes in our neighborhoods? If that happens, the thing that people want to happen, Trump needs to go right now. Okay, Trump goes right now. 10 minutes from now, he's like, you know what? I'm not doing this. I don't want to do this anymore. It's too much work. Packs up his stuff, takes his ball, and goes home to Mar-a-Lago with his wife and his kids, who I'm convinced there's something wrong. Anyway, let me not go. How do our material conditions improve with an absent Trump, with an absent GOP? And before you answer that question, before you say, well, this is why we elect Democrats, so they can do the will of the people. Democrats actually had that kind of scenario for at least a year under the first administration of Barack Obama. We had a Democrat president. We had a Black Democrat president. We had a supermajority in Congress. He could have passed a whole bunch of legislation that, sure, it would have ended up in court. Absolutely. If he had passed legislation to establish Medicare for all, would it have ended up in court? Sure, it would have. Definitely would have ended up in court. But the fight is the point. Right? Isn't that the point? Isn't when we say, well, it's the thought that counts? I mean, people wanted to see that he would have at least tried to fight for us, for the people. And what happened? Did our material conditions improve? And when I say our, I'm not talking about the petty bourgeois Black folks who got some relief for their mortgage through that janky TANF program that did not help most Black homeowners, because most Black homeowners lost their homes under the Obama administration and his response to the Great Recession. And see, I don't have any more time left to go into why our conditions will not change under such a scenario with a Democrat president, even if the president is Black, with a Democratic supermajority in Congress, because we've been there. That has happened. And we still got our behinds beat by the pigs. We still got our kids arrested en masse by the police. We were still treated like super predators and inherently violent and amoral criminals. And a lot of that finger wagging and shaming was done by Barack Obama himself. So in this moment, dear listeners and viewers, when, yes, what we are seeing Trump doing is something that a lot of people who are 20, 30 years younger than me, and or people who have never, who didn't grow up in this city and don't know this history, sure, I know what you're seeing right now is terrifying. I understand that. I am just here telling you, my friends, that we've seen all of this before. We've seen it before. And unless we get rid of this entire capitalist, white supremacist, settler colonial, patriarchal, Zionist system, we will see it again and again and again. Now, we're just about out of time. I got about 5 minutes left. So I do have to tell you about some weird things that have happened in the news that I don't, I, I'm not sure what kind of universe. It's weird, upside down, crazy town, the end of an empire kind of universe when everything just kind of goes off the rails. So, in a great development, in a fantastic development, a Florida judge has ordered that alligator Alcatraz must be dismantled. And this happened because the Miccosukee tribe of Indians won their environmental impact lawsuit against Governor Ron DeSantis over the environmental impacts the alligator Alcatraz concentration camp was having in the federally protected Everglades. This ruling came yesterday, just late yesterday, from U.S. District Judge Kathleen Williams, and the ruling forbids state officials from moving any other migrants to that concentration camp, which deals a blow to what had become a marquee symbol of President Donald Trump's immigration policy. So that is fantastic news. Shout out to the Miccosukee Nation. The first people will lead the way, and they must, because this is their land. So big ups to y'all. Thank you so much. We'll see what happens, because just because a judge issues an order, these people do not care. They don't care. So we'll see what's going to happen. But that's the news on that. And here's a really weird one. I honestly don't even know how to feel about this one, because I want to kind of celebrate, but I know it's bad, right? Because don't we all hate John Bolton? Don't we all know that John Bolton is a war criminal, and he needed to have his stuff raided, seized, and himself tossed in prison a long time ago? So it's really weird right now, dear friends and dear listeners and dear viewers, to read that the FBI searched the home and office of John Bolton, who was Trump's former national security advisor in his first administration. And they had a big old falling out because Bolton found out how ignorant Trump is. And Bolton, being the psychopathic bully that he is, he was just out in the world talking about it. That man don't have no sense. He don't know what he doing. He crazy. And you know what? I was here for that too. but you got to understand that Trump is a narcissistic, he's a malignant narcissistic bully, and he ain't gonna never let nothing go. So this is a lot. This is a lot of what that is. Trump going down his list of people he gonna get back for what they did to him, what he thinks they did to him in his first administration. So FBI agents just today searched the Washington area home and office of former Trump administration National Security Advisor John Bolton as part of an investigation into whether he illegally possessed or shared classified information, according to multiple law enforcement officials with the matter. That's not the reason those officials who spoke on the condition of anonymity, and this is from the Washington Post, by the way, as the previous article it was from. The officials who spoke on the condition of anonymity because they were not authorized to discuss the probe, then why they talk at all? If they said the investigation focused on allegations the Justice Department previously pursued during President Donald Trump's first term that Bolton divulged classified government material in his 2020 book. Another person familiar with the current inquiry said its scope extended beyond that long dormant probe to include other, more long-running accusations that Bolton had leaked sensitive materials. That's not why they raided that man's house, y'all. They raided that man's house because Trump has a list that is probably 87 pages long. 87 long that he needs people to fix that. Oh, I don't know where my thing went. Uh-oh, something happened. Well, I guess that is a clear indication that it's time to go. I am out of time. Look at that. Tech starts falling apart as soon as the show is over. But it's just in time because that's all I have for Darker Than Blue today. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Darker Than Blue. I hope you learned some information that helps you deal with what we are going through in a little bit more of an objective, a calm, and a purposeful and intentional way. Don't freak out. Don't panic. Organize. That's what I want you to take away from this. Do not panic about what Trump is doing. Organize to change this entire system so that nobody is ever able to do it again. That's all I got for this week. Thank you so much for joining me. A luta continua, the struggle continues. But if we keep fighting, if we keep learning this history, y'all, Victoria Acerta. Victory is certain. Peace. All right, y'all. A little teeny bit of an after show. I always keep trying to do too much and then can't ever keep up with the too much that I want to do. So yeah. Thanks so much for joining me on this show. I want to tell you that what you just heard is a part of a larger article that I just finished writing today that is going to be published in a few places, in a couple of places. I'm hoping that I can submit it to Black Agenda Report and Hood Communist and my own Substack, which I actually have, and I just don't, because I'm trying to finish some things and I'm doing too much. But you, dear friends, got the first peek of that article. So thank you so much, and I appreciate you for your support. I can tell you that the mood here in DC is the mood here in the hood is like, they don't want this. Like, I think there are people in this city, and a lot of those people are sadly my age and older. They are afraid of the youth. They really are. And not because there have been a bunch of violent attacks on senior citizens in this city. There hasn't been. The propaganda is so pervasive about amoral criminal youth. And then on top of that, you have this what's the word I'm looking for? You have this aspect of respectability that Black folks are, man, we got to leave that shit alone. I really do think that a lot of the issue with Black folks in our neighborhoods, because I deal with this with some of my own neighbors. They're very much, when they see a bunch of kids just hanging out, they are with the purse. And, oh, girl, do you see that? Be careful. What, them kids? Man, please. I ain't paying no attention to them kids. They're fine. They ain't doing nothing to me. Oh, I have no reason to worry about them. Leave them alone. A lot of that comes from this respectability politics bullshit that we've got in our head that comes from a lot of places. Yeah, it comes from white supremacy. It comes from a racist propaganda against Black people and indoctrination. It is the dehumanization and the degradation of everything about our existence. Everything about our existence is illegitimate. It's inhuman. It's we're childlike. We're not even seen as adults. So our response to that has been, well, let's show them how, how cultured and how educated and how acceptable we are. Let's show them that they can respect us. We're respectable like them. That's what a lot of this bullshit is. And this is why you have a lot of people who say things like, the problem with Black women today is miniskirts. And I actually, oh man, an elder I have a great deal of respect for shared an old video of uh, Muhammad Ali talking about the problem with miniskirts and how, what kind of man would he be if he allowed his wife out of the house with a miniskirt on? She's out there just showing all her skin and the whole world looking at her. And then that actually brought to mind a clip from a documentary on the Duggar family called Shiny Happy People, in which a white evangelical pastor, obviously a man, is in the pulpit, old fat white dude in the pulpit. So I'm not gonna say that. Okay, I'm not gonna say because that was gonna be real foul. But old fat white dude in the pulpit yelling and screaming about, you women are out here with your short skirts and your shorts on, showing your legs to the whole world. And we don't even understand that the way we talk about how we present ourselves in a disgraceful way, in an over sexual way. Now, look, I'm all for not overly sexualizing children. I am against these beauty pageants for little kids. That's obscene. The fuck? They're children. But if I, as a grown ass woman, want to go out of my house with bandages and some thread not covering my shit, what's your problem? That don't have nothing to do with you. All of this foolishness comes from this idea that is a complete misinterpretation, and it's an obvious intentional misinterpretation of this idea of gender roles and the roles of women from the Bible. Because see, when you let men and when you let white men and when you let colonizing white men interpret your holy texts, they will write down shit that's not in there to say shit to make you subservient to them. And that's exactly what has happened. So this is why you got a bunch of women running around, and it's women shaming other women, shaming young Black women. Well, see, this is why the police is always. No, the police are not fucking with our kids because they in short skirts with their titties out. That's not what. And that's wild to me because I've known some of these people for a long time. I didn't seen. So it's wild to me to have conversations with people who are more obsessed or more focused on this idea that we can still get these people to stop killing us if we wear the right clothes, if we speak proper English, if we get the right degrees, if we present ourselves as non-threatening, if we're good, upstanding Christians who stand by Israel and adhere to the gender roles that the white Christians tell us to, I don't understand how they continue to believe this with the drumbeat of Black youth death not abating, despite all of the ways that we are killed, all of the ways that we are dressed. I mean, you do know that they lynched us in our Sunday best, right? You do know that they murdered us while we were in church, right? Murdered whole elected officials in the chambers doing their jobs after they rewrote the constitutions of the southern states and made them more progressive, giving women the right to vote, giving even poor white farmers economic relief and ownership of land, right? What more respectable job could you possibly have than to be a formerly enslaved man who is now an elected official who is a lawmaker? How much more respectable do you want? And they murdered them too, and the white people who worked with them. So I'm not sure why we still hang on to this ridiculous belief that we deserve all of the degradation and the oppression that we experience because we don't act right. Like the lady, the ICJ judge from, where is she from? Nigeria, I think. The one who voted against the arrest warrant for Netanyahu and all this kind of stuff. She finally fesses up and says, oh, well, I did it because the Lord is relying on me to stand with Israel. The Lord ain't relying on you to do no such fucking thing, you fucking genocidal liar. I don't care that she's an African woman. She is a genocidaire. And she's a fucking liar because the Bible does not say that you have to stand with Israel. That's not what that book says, period. So we have these ridiculous ideas that we should not still have because, damn it, we can read now. It is not illegal to read. And we don't, and we won't. We won't confront this history. We won't look at the ways that Democratic politicians have kicked our asses in this city. Because a lot of us still believe that if we behave enough, not only will they leave us alone, maybe they'll give us a few crumbs. So for a lot of these people in the city right now, who are standing up against Trump's actions, are ignoring what Muriel Bowser did. She's getting let off the hook. As a matter of fact, she is being made into a hero. Oh, is it Uganda she was from? Thank y'all for correcting me. I thought it was Nigeria. Thank you for the correction. I appreciate that. Yeah. So I'm not, I don't, what y'all think these people gonna give you? That you couldn't get shit from Muriel Bowser. What you think the white people gonna give you? Muriel Bowser, I keep mispronouncing her name because I hate her so much. Muriel Bowser. Muriel Bowser not only did not stop kicking our asses, but when the whites came in and wanted to kick our asses in a different way, her response was, well, that's inconvenient, but okay. Whereas when Bush sent the National Guard in 1989, Marion Barry, the police chief, Peter Newsham, and the chief of the DC National Guard, they were all like, now, wait a minute. Wait. Now, this is a fucking bridge too far. Okay, we know you have the right to do it as president, but we're fitting to tell you what the National Guard is not going to do in our city to our residents. We didn't get that kind of energy from Bowser. And people are not, they're not responding to it. They're not holding her accountable at all. Like, people really did not know. I was kind of surprised. I don't know why I thought people would know this, but they didn't. People didn't know that Muriel Bowser requested the National Guard to be deployed to Lafayette Square Park in 2020. She was the first one to request that the National Guard be deployed to clear Lafayette Square Park in 2020. When she made her public statement against Trump deploying the National Guard, that was after she submitted her request and her request was approved. She complained because the law enforcement entities that Trump called in were not under her authority. The National Guard was, because she requested them. So she was mad because Trump called in more law enforcement agencies than she did, and they were all under his authority. People didn't know that, and people were like, well, Trump did so and so and so. I'm like, yeah, but did you know that? And then even before that, she issued a curfew that was, at first, the curfew was 11 o'clock. Then all of a sudden, she changed the curfew to 7 p.m. And she did not tell the law enforcement agencies at Lafayette Park until about an hour and a half before the curfew was to go into effect. And we see what happened, right? So there is a serious, there's a serious issue among our people who are the most oppressed, who have lived through this, people who have lived in Southeast DC all their lives. Like, okay, for real, I'm gonna be real now. I'm gonna be very, very, very real, very, very transparent. And this is gonna get me in trouble with some people, but I think it's important that I do this. I have a family member who's big old huge football fan, huge, bigger than me. And my interest in football is waning a lot. Probably won't watch this year at all. NFL, that is. College is hard for me. It's hard for me to break away from college football. I'm sorry. It's just hard. I'm just sorry. It's hard. But anyway, so my family member loves football, loves the Washington football team, always has. He is the guy who is burgundy and gold top to bottom. He's got jerseys. He's got, his house is painted burgundy and gold. He bought a van that was burgundy and gold. He is the fan, right? We see what's happening with Bowser and this stadium deal for this new stadium that she wants built in DC for this football team, to bring the team back to DC. And he is like, yeah, I'm ready. I want this stadium. I want this stadium. Now we're at the family reunion, and if you guys haven't figured it out about me yet, I don't have a lot of chill. I don't. It's true of me. I don't have an off switch, really. It's hard for me to it's always been hard for me to relax. I've always been pretty tightly wound. That's just how I am. I'm just kind of very intense, and just kind of how I am. When I have fun, I have a lot of fun. When I am serious, I am dead fucking serious. I don't do in between or half measures all that well. And I don't do like small talk all that well. I try, but it always ends up political. So we're at the family reunion and he's talking about the stadium. And I'm just like, the fuck? What do you mean you want this stadium? I'm like, are you crazy? We're going to pay for that shit. We are going to pay for that stadium. Well, what you mean? You're not going to get it. You are paying for it. It's not being given to DC. It ain't free. Not for us. It's free for the owners of the team. It's free for the NFL. They're not going to pay for it. We're paying for it. And this is what you want. This is what you want the mayor of DC to do with our money. You want to bring a football stadium into the city when we got people living on the street. And oh my God, I up and down read that man the Riot Act, and he's my relative and I love him. But I was so annoyed. And his response was just like, well, you know, those politicians ain't gonna do nothing like that. They ain't gonna get that money to them people. They ain't gonna do this. They ain't gonna do a third. They ain't gonna do. Okay, cool. Absolutely right. I agree. But this is why we organize to fight them, to force it to happen one way or another. Either you do what we ask, or, and we have to have an or, and that has been the problem, I think, among organizers. Our or else has always been voting. Which, listen, it's a tool in the tool book and a toolkit, and we should use it, which means that when politicians at every level, particularly the local level, betray us, they need to be a one-term politician. And they need to be a one-term politician replaced with somebody from the community that the community organized to prepare and elevate to take that position. And then when you get that person in that position, you have got to protect them to keep them from becoming corrupted by the same forces that turned everybody else into the neoliberal Black misleadership class that they are. Right? I think that's true. So I'm not against voting. I'm just saying our response to political betrayal, to the Black misleadership class in particular, especially, we need to have a you need to serve the people or else, and we need to have an or else, because they know we don't. That's why they don't do shit. That's why they are not compelled to do shit for us, because they know we don't have an or else, because they know most of us are not organized, because they know that the government crushed left movements, crushed left organizations, imprisoned left organizers for decades, threw our people into solitary confinement for 20, 30, 40 years for organizing against this capitalist system to free our people. These people know what this system has done to create the political environment that we live in now, in which we are disempowered. They know who did the disempowering. They know. So this thing of these people running for office saying, well, you know, we can change the party from the inside. They know damn well they're not going to change this party from the inside. They want their check. And when they get in office, like Wes Moore, you see how when they get in office, the talk is one thing when they're campaigning, but when they get in office, the actions are neoliberalism, the actions are conservatism, the actions are militarism, the actions are repression of the poor. So for the Black misleadership class, yeah, I do think we should, if we're going to talk about voting, let's focus it on them. I think that's absolutely a tactic that we should really talk about. If we're going to keep talking about voting, okay. All right. Who's the most effective target for our efforts? The Black misleadership class. I think that's true. Just an idea. But there are a lot of people among us, wherever we are. So I don't think this situation with our people either supporting, you know, these bullshit neoliberal policies, or just not caring and you know, just going along to get along. It's not unique to people here in DC. I know that's not it. This is all over. This is everyone around us and among us. We are all around Black people, oppressed people, immigrants, and other people, First Nations people. We are all around people who have this, you know, propagandized backward way of thinking about themselves in this oppressive system. But that's also why we organize, because we have to help those people see the truth. We have to give them the truth. We are not going to convince all of them, but the ones we do convince, they are the ones we need. So we need to be organizing to have a response to the political actions that have been carried out against us, that have created the situation we continue to live in. And we also need to be organized to help our people understand why they need to fight, understand who they need to fight, understand what we are fighting against, and understand what we are fighting for. And honestly, to teach people how to fight. But we are surrounded by people who get all their information from social media, who believe everything that is said on the corporate news outlets, who believe the politicians when they lie to their faces about themselves and their communities and other people, and who don't want to have anything to do with crazy, commie, socialist, Pan-African leftists like me. And they will flat out tell you, oh, I know this is bad. This is something I had a neighbor tell me. Oh, I know this is bad. I know they don't treat us fair. I know. But communism is deadly. You know how many people capitalism killed this morning? What are you crazy? So we are really fighting on all fronts. We are fighting the system, obviously. We are fighting the politicians every generation who continue to prop up the system and continue to carry out this war against us. We are fighting not just conservatives, but we're also fighting liberals. We're not just fighting the white politicians who are racist. We are fighting the Black politicians who are classists, who hate poor people. Muriel Bowser is one of those people. We are fighting misguided Black politicians like, I'm sad to say, Trayon White, who welcomed the National Guard. And before they even came, he actually was going to introduce a request to call in the National Guard. Trayon White, the mentee of former mayor for life, Marion Barry, the mentee of Marion Barry, who in response to George Bush deploying the National Guard to DC, got on camera and said, you do not go farther than this. This is the line. You go no further. We down bad, yo. We are down bad in this city with these Black misleaders, with these misinformed people who get all their information from social media, who don't want to be involved in organizing, who have more smoke for organizers than they do the police and the politicians that's kicking their ass. That I think that's very true of the material conditions that we exist in, and it makes organizing very difficult. But it is not without its great rewards, because every time I have a conversation with people who still have those backward thoughts, and I can get them to have even a slight glimmer of acknowledgement that, oh, something in this narrative they believe doesn't quite add up, doesn't quite make sense. Can't figure out what it is, but something doesn't smell right now. Or, oh, I didn't know that about what Reagan did in the early 80s. That destabilized our neighborhood, took resources out of our neighborhoods, that made it impossible for us to navigate the storm of crack that came after. And honestly, after Reagan destabilized our communities, we couldn't weather anything. We had no resources to do anything. So it didn't have to be crack. It could have been anything else. And the outcome really would have been the same. That is how devastating the policies that Reagan passed were to the fabric of stability of our communities. Imagine being a kid in high school like I was, hanging out in your neighborhood, great place to live, you're having a good time. You know that St. Elizabeth's is there because it's huge. You can't miss it, right? Everybody knows what St. Elizabeth's is. Among us, there was not a lot of stigma, and I mean us as in youth, the kids. Now, adults might have been a different thing, but among the kids, we knew what St. Elizabeth's was. We knew that it was a mental institution. We knew some of our family members and friends had to check themselves in to get themselves straight. Some of our family members had a heroin addiction from the Vietnam era, and they said they got straight by literally walking into St. Elizabeth's and saying, I want to kick this shit. I need to kick heroin. Please sign me up for your program. Because it was federally funded, because it was free. And as it might not have been up to the standards of today's medical treatment, medically assisted drug rehab, but it worked. It was something. It was a resource that we were able to access, literally just by walking off the street into St. Elizabeth's and asking for help. Reagan took that away. He took that away all across the country, and all across the country, literally overnight, one day, I'm walking to Safeway to get my pot pies and cat food because, I had a little bit of money for food, but the food was all cheap processed food because that's all the money I had left. So I ate a lot of pot pies, a lot of tuna, a lot of bologna, a lot of hot dogs. So, and yes, that is where my love of bologna and hot dogs probably comes from. But yeah, so one day I'm walking to Safeway past St. Elizabeth's, like normal, like I had done so many days before. And the next day, I'm going up on Martin Luther King Jr. Avenue for some reason. And all of a sudden, there are all of these people who I know there is something not quite right with them. People I'd never seen before, never seen that kind of a group of people hanging out on the avenue like that in that location before. Overnight, y'all. This happened overnight. We lived, well, Joe Anthony, we don't all know. This is the thing. We keep saying things like everybody. No, everybody does not know because they're not teaching anybody this history that I just told you about today and last week, the policies that Reagan implemented that destabilized our communities. I have had conversations with people preparing for these shows in this article, telling them, when St. Elizabeth's had to let all the mental patients out because the federal government for mental health institutions was slashed by Reagan, almost everybody I talked to was like, is that how that happened? and I'm just like, oh. Now, I remember when it happened, and I remember what happened, right? So I remember, like I said, being up on the avenue one day, everything is normal, everything is fine. Being on the avenue the next day or a couple days later, and all of a sudden there are mentally unstable people literally just aimlessly wandering around the neighborhood because there was no more money to house and feed them during the day. St. Elizabeth's had no choice but to let people out because they could not take care of them. If their families could not come and pick them up or take them, or take them home or take them to another a program because there was no other facility in DC. And Reagan's legislation, instead of doing what Carter's legislation intended to do, which was to give federal money to community mental health services all across the country, Reagan's legislation gave money to the states for mental health services that the states didn't provide. They gave that money, they either kept it or they gave that money to private corporations. So the privatization of mental health in this country happened because of Reagan. It happened through the legislation he passed, and it created the homeless problem that we are still dealing with today. People don't know that. A lot of people who live in our communities, who even lived through this, they don't know those details. And learning that these were intentional decisions that were made by politicians to take these services out of our communities, not replace them with anything, not. Then people were able to put together how the crack epidemic caused the kind of destruction and devastation that we live through. Because I know that when I was growing up, we didn't there were not homeless people there were not homeless people. There weren't. There were not homeless people living on the street in Southeast DC. I'm not saying there were not homeless people in the city at all, but we did not have a level of homelessness like we see now. And if there was homelessness, it was minuscule. There was certainly poverty, but I'm really not exaggerating, y'all. One day, our neighborhood was a great place for a kid to be. The next day, it was the most unsafe place I think I had ever been in. All of a sudden, we were afraid to walk through our own neighborhoods. All of a sudden, the stores that we frequented, that provided us the materials that we needed, and even like the jobs for our kids, they had to close because of the petty crime that rose when St. Elizabeth's had to let people out of the institution onto the street, because the people who were left out on the street, they had nowhere to go. Their families did not come and pick them up, claim them, or they just didn't have anywhere else to put them. So they roamed the streets. And because they didn't have anywhere to go, where were they going to go? But the place where they were let out of. And nobody is going to voluntarily starve. So they didn't have jobs. So they started stealing. They started shoplifting because they needed to eat. And when crack hit the streets, then they had a cheap, fast way to self-medicate. So I don't assume that everybody knows this history that I lived, because even as I'm preparing to write the article and getting my information together and checking my sources and everything, there are things that I learned, like, you know how I talked about, excuse me, barometric pressure going up and down all over the place, messing with my sinuses. Apologies. So remember when I talked about the DEA setting up this kid to sell him a bag of crack at the White House? Where is that article? There you are. WHYY, which is public broadcasting, wrote this article. And let's see, can I share it with you? I think I can. I think I will. Okay. No, it's acting like it doesn't want. Oh, here we go. Really? You don't want to do it? Yep, it doesn't want to do it. Okay, it's not going to do it. Yeah, my computer is having a hissy fit right now. So let me just read it to you. 30 years ago, George H.W. Bush held up a bag of crack on live TV. Where did he get it? The article says, and this was published in March 26, 2019, by the Uncertain Hour, I guess, which was a show on WHYY's Marketplace. So they say in the very first address from the Oval Office, President George H.W. Bush looked into the camera and held up a clear plastic baggie of chalky white chunks. This is crack cocaine, seized a few days ago by drug enforcement agents in a park just across the street from the White House, he said. It's as innocent looking as candy, but it's turning our cities into battle zones. No one was safe from drugs, Bush warned, and it was time to get tough. The article goes on to say that overall drug use, and the use of crack in particular, was in decline by 1989. But Bush turbocharged the war on drugs that night anyway. He would go on to spend 45 million, I'm sorry, that's not right, 45 billion more than the previous 4 administrations combined, most of it on law enforcement, militarized police. It all started with the one baggie of crack, but the story of how Bush got that political prop is far more complicated than what he told the American people. Now, before I finish reading this article to you, I just want to make this point. Oh, this thing is doing all kinds of wacky stuff. The Bush press conference, or whatever you want to call it, address to the nation that night, that was the topic of conversation. Oh my God, we talked about that shit for damn near a year almost, because we was like, who in their right mind is selling crack around the White House? Ain't nobody selling no shit. And because we were like, that don't even seem right. And this is the same community of folks all across the country now. Again, like I said, this is not unique to Washington, D.C. I know damn well it wasn't just D.C. Bammers who responded to that address to the nation in this way. Just like I know it wasn't just the elders in my neighborhood who were convinced from very early on in the crack epidemic that the government was responsible for crack being in our neighborhoods. Right? So we talked about this stupid press conference for a long time because we're just like, who is selling crack up there? Anybody in his right mind selling crack around the White House, on the National Mall, where all of the law enforcement is? That makes no sense. So we peeped the lie immediately. But as the years have passed, because remember, this is 30 years ago, some of those people have died, and some people have forgotten, and really some people weren't born then. They didn't live here then. They don't know. A lot of people did not know that this happened, but nobody, I don't think most people knew how this happened until the DEA admitted it. So the article continues by saying, Lafayette Park, where the drugs were seized, isn't your typical city park because it's so close to the White House. It's literally across the White House lawn, on the other side of the White House lawn, and across the street from the White House, a street that is now closed, but Pennsylvania Avenue in front of the White House used to be open and you could walk down it, ride your bike, all this kind of stuff. Yeah. So they say it's crawling with tourists and Secret Service agents. Yeah. Just in case you didn't know, every time you come to DC and you're at a protest in Lafayette Square Park, Secret Service is always out there. No, you don't see all of them. Yeah, you see the ones in uniform with the weapons and the cars, the big black SUVs, but there are snipers on the roof of the White House. There are also snipers on the other buildings around the White House, and there are undercover Secret Service and other law enforcement agency agents milling around. So you ain't never alone. You are not ever not under surveillance. Yeah, okay. So somebody selling drugs in Lafayette, man. In fact, the article says there wasn't much crack in downtown Washington at all, said Don Schatz. In 1989, Schatz was selling drugs himself. How do we know there were no drugs in downtown DC? Because a drug dealer who was selling drugs was like, we don't go there. He was selling drugs across town in Northeast DC. He said, nothing is impossible when it comes to drugs, but when you break it down and really think about it, nobody sells crack in front of the fucking White House. That's what we all said. We were like, who does that? Nobody does that. Nobody would do that. So what were the odds, the article says, someone would get caught there just a few days before a highly anticipated speech about drugs, and that Drug Enforcement Administration agents would just happen to be there looking for them? Mike Isikoff, then a reporter at the Washington Post, started asking around. U.S. Park Police told him there had never been a crack arrest in Lafayette Park until that one. Isikoff went on to ask William McCullen, the special agent in charge of the DEA's Washington office, who had been setting up undercover buys in drug-flooded neighborhoods like Schatz. McMullen told Isikoff that he got a call from the DEA a few days before Bush's speech. The agency wanted to know if there were any buys happening around the White House, or if the DEA could move one there. Yes, that's the DEA agent. The agency wanted to know if there were any buys happening around the White House, or if the DEA could move a drug buy. If the DEA could go to the hood, pick up one of the drug dealers, take him to the White House, and then buy the drugs there, so they could say that Isikoff remembers McCullen sounding proud of how hard it was to make that happen. That is what they did. Wow. So this was all a setup, is what I'm thinking, Isikoff said. And in fact, it was. A couple of weeks after Bush's speech, Isikoff published his discovery on the front page of the Washington Post. I remember that that newspaper, and I wish I had kept it, but I didn't. But I'm going to try to get a copy of that, because that was an amazing story. The revelation snowballed into a scandal for the White House. Dana Carvey performed a parody of the speech on Saturday Night Live. Bush administration officials at the time, and to this day, said they did not ask for anything special. They just asked for the DEA to entrap an unfortunate poor Black kid selling crack. That's what they asked for. They claimed the White House just wanted drugs from DEA inventory, something that had been previously seized close by. If there are no drug deals close by, why would DEA have inventory of what has not been sold close by? We still don't know the exact cause. A request from the White House, some overeager person at the DEA, or a miscommunication between offices. It won't, none of that. It was the White House literally saying, get one of these young niggas up here so we can get some crack and make a point. But the fact remains, there was a special drug buy set up for the speech. And there is an image. I'm going to give you a link to this article so you can see it yourself. There's an image of a paragraph in a memo that the caption says references to a crack sale near the White House appear in early drafts of Bush's speech. This one is dated August 17, 1989. The actual buy didn't happen for another 2 weeks. Please understand what I'm saying. And let me read to you what the speech says. And it's literally a script of the speech that we watched. Pick up vial, which was the little baggie. This is the instruction. This is the menace. This crack cocaine seized last night. He was writing in this speech that the cocaine was seized last night, 2 weeks before the cocaine was actually seized. This was not an accident. It wasn't a misunderstanding. The White House, George H.W. Bush, set this 18-year-old kid up. Keith Jackson is his name. So the memo, the script continues. This crack cocaine seized last night by Drug Enforcement Administration agents just 10 blocks from where I'm sitting now. It could just as easily have been heroin or PCP. It's as innocent looking as candy, but it is turning our cities into battle zones, and it's murdering our children by the thousands. Remember, though, what I said earlier. By this point, by 1989, crack use, crack sales, and the violence associated with crack had all begun to decline. And actually, it wasn't beginning to decline. It had declined pretty significantly by that point. Because by 1989, it was almost, what? Almost 10 years? Let there be no mistake, he said, this is the enemy. And then the instructions tell him to set the vial down out of camera range. He says, the script says, some use to call drugs a benign form of recreation. Drugs are a creeping malignancy that threaten our neighbors, our homes, and our families. And it is because of this that Americans are willing, as never before, to go on a war footing against drugs. Let me give you the link to this article right now so that I do not forget, because I don't want you to leave this broadcast without this article. And I want you to look up Keith Jackson and what happened to him after this was done to him, because this ruined his life. It absolutely ruined his life. But it's weird, that Bush has this whole script about, how drugs are the menace. But he didn't say shit about poverty being the menace, because that's what the real menace is. Poverty. But he wasn't going to do anything to address poverty. And please understand that Bush, Reagan, Clinton, Obama, the other Bush, all of them, Carter, all of them, every single one of them, know that it is poverty that drives intracommunal crime. They know this. Reagan defunding federal mental health institutions and creating homelessness, Reagan ending the CETA program and increasing unemployment and creating massive youth unemployment, which when you create unemployment, you also lower the income of the community. Reagan passing legislation that he did, his drug legislation with the unequal sentences for crack cocaine and powdered cocaine, he understood full well what the outcome would be for us. Even if there was never a crack epidemic that happened after it, he knew that those things would economically destroy us, because that's what he wanted. Because that is the whole point behind these neoliberal policies, whether they are delivered by conservatives or Democrats. The entire point is to maintain an oppressed class of people. What's the easiest way to oppress people? Take their money. Take their money and criminalize everything they do. And that's what was done to us. And that is what is still being done to us. So when I explain to people this history and I'm trying to tell them this is why what Trump is doing is not new, because Trump did not start this. He didn't start it, not even close. He is merely continuing and escalating, but he's continuing the same war against us that every politician before him has waged. So this information, I think, this history of what brought us to this point, what the war on drugs really was, who actually was involved in pushing the war on drugs, how they did it, and how the community really responded, how we actually responded. Those things are vitally important to us understanding what we are facing today, because if we don't focus on the foundation of the thing, the root cause of the thing, and deal with who actually did all this and the system that allowed it to happen, instead of just trying to deal with a person that we don't like here or there, we're going to find ourselves right back here in a very short period of time. It'll just be a different face. And next time it'll probably be a Democrat, because if the way folks are responding to Muriel Bowser right now, making her out to be some victim of Trump, because they refuse to deal with the fact that she has been victimizing us, just like Trump is victimizing us now all of this time, then we're going to be right back in this situation the very next day. Because what's going to happen is people are going to get rid of Trump and they're going to leave all the black misleaders in place, because Trump was after those people. He's doing this to punish them because he's a racist. Yeah, he is. But they're also pieces of shit. They are also enemies of the people. These black misleaders. Muriel Bowser is not our friend. Neither is Wes Moore. I shouldn't have to tell you that Eric Adams ain't your damn friend. What's her face down in Atlanta? She ain't our friend. They ain't our friend. There are very few of these Democrat mayors who have not relied on the same racist, tough on crime lies about youth violence being out of control. There are very few of them who have not employed that rhetoric to deploy the militarized police into our neighborhoods. Very few. I mean, if the black misleadership class wasn't a problem, where'd Cop City come from? Why did we have to have a whole fight over Cop City? If Trump is the problem, did Trump advocate for Cop City? Did he push Cop City? Or was that a bunch of black ass mayors? Yeah. So this is actually kind of cathartic, because I had been thinking about this history for a really long time, I think, and really just kind of frustrated at how people dismiss the way. No, I don't know how to say it. It's an annoying feeling I'm having about the conversations that we're having with people about this history that I know exists in almost all of our cities, and people are very dismissive of it, like it doesn't matter. They're very dismissive of oh well, I know Muriel Bowser has done some things that we don't like. But she's being attacked by Trump now, and we have to protect her. No, we don't. I do not have to protect that woman from Donald Trump, because she didn't protect any of our kids from the forces that she unleashed on us. And honestly, she's not protecting us from Trump. So it's been very frustrating, on top of the typical frustrations of being an organizer who has a platform. And I am foolish enough to think that, me getting on this platform and ranting like I do is beneficial to some people, but always having to deal with some negativity, people who come into the chat to always criticize every single thing I say for no real reason, on top of all of that. And then on top of the real life bullshit you got to deal with real life people in real life in organizing spaces. And then on top of all of that regular life stuff, you got to pay bills. You don't have enough money to pay all the bills. They're cutting your shit off because you ain't paid the bills, and your shit ain't gonna be turned on until you get some more money at the beginning of next month to pay the bill. Right? Just on top of all that, then you have to have this conversation with people in this moment, explaining to them why, okay, I get that Trump is the face of this right now, but he is not the reason this is happening. This has been happening. He's not our problem. The system that they all exist in to do this to us, that's the problem. That's what we need to get rid of. And then as soon as you get there, people are like, well, no, you talking that communism stuff. You talking that socialism stuff. No, I'm a capitalist. You are not a capitalist. You are not a capitalist. You are broke. You are a broke, oppressed person. I can't even call you an American, because if you were, you wouldn't be in the situation you're in. You're not a capitalist. And capitalism does not benefit you. It doesn't exist to benefit you. You having a job and getting a paycheck, that is not capitalism. People have jobs and get paychecks in socialist countries. It's very true. They do. People have jobs and get paychecks in communist countries. So that does not indicate that it's capitalism. It's capitalism because all of your money that's not given to you in your paycheck is actually stolen by your boss, because your paycheck should be way bigger than it is. That's number one, because you're not getting paid for the value of the labor that you contributed. You are getting paid what the CEO of that company wants to pay you, so that the CEO and the board of directors and the investors can amass as much profit as possible. You don't get that paycheck in order for you to be comfortable. Your paycheck exists. It's the contract between you and the boss that you are going to provide the labor, and they are going to take most of the money that the labor produces. That's what your job is. And that is capitalism. You getting a paycheck for your job. That's not socialism. And that doesn't make you a capitalist either. Socialism is when you have resources that the government uses to ensure that everybody has a home. So the government uses its resources to build homes for everybody. Why would that not be something you want when we live in a city that is controlled by Congress and lead up to Muriel Bowser, and she has not shied away from them. She keeps giving them our stuff. But we have to have these conversations with people when we're telling them that the problem is bigger than Trump. It'll still be here when he's gone. So we might as well focus on the root cause now, only to have those people turn around and talking about, oh, well, you one of them socialists. Oh, no. Well, the fuck it, stay oppressed then. Damn it. Go ahead, stay oppressed. Go and throw yourself in front of the police car. next time it comes around, man. Because at the end of the day, what it boils down to is that people don't want to oppose what they really do know is that they don't want to oppose Bowser. They don't want to oppose the Democrats. They want to keep it at the Republicans because some people actually really believe that the Democrats give a damn about them, even though they keep living under Democratic administrations that show that they don't. And honestly, maybe the two Democrats that we could claim in this city really did care about the people was the first mayor, Walter E. Washington, and the second one, Marion Barry. Contradictions included, right? We've never had leadership in this city anything like those men, nothing like them. The exact opposite, the complete departure from those men. And that was also intentional. That was an intentional political decision made by the Democratic Party when they decided that they were going to change their platform from focusing on justice for marginalized people to privatization and the adoption of conservative policies so that they could appeal to conservative voters. That extended to all of these Democrat mayors. They had to be near you. You couldn't run as a Democrat, and you still can't. We're watching what happens with this young man, not Mamdani, but he's a good example too. That, here he is, a Democratic socialist running as a Democrat. Oh, God. Somehow thinking that, I don't know, he can change the party from the inside, whatever it is he's thinking. And what happens? The neoliberal propagandizer in chief, Obama, calls him. You think Obama was calling that man to encourage him to stay the course and stick to your democratic socialist principles? And hell no. Obama told that man, stop talking about Gaza. We don't give a shit about them people. You're not going to win as a Democrat unless you leave that alone. Oh, and by the way, stop talking about rent control and all those socialist policies that the Democratic Party is not going to support in New York and anywhere else. That's what Obama told him. And watch him. Watch. Just watch. That's all. I'm just saying, just watch. So we're watching the same thing happen with this young guy in another place, and the Democratic Party has just yanked their endorsement of him. That's been the Democratic Party. You can't run as a Democrat and have any kind of people-focused, people-centered policies. It doesn't matter what the policy is. If it's not privatization, the Democrats are going to call it socialist and communist, even when it's not. This is the kind of thing that, yes, thank you, Pamela, Minnesota. This is the kind of thing that a lot of our people don't want to admit is true about Black politicians. So people in DC, there are a lot of people, older people in DC, who are circling the wagons around Muriel Bowser and celebrating. Well, somebody's got to come in here and get these damn kids under control. And we're going to have to figure out what we're going to have to do with some of them too. But there's a lot of pearl clutching for all the wrong reasons on all sides for this in the middle of this situation with this deployment of the National Guard that Trump has done here in DC. But as I have said, this ain't new for us. We are not new to this. This has been our reality, our material condition, our life for decades. And we have never had control over our own government in this city. Congress still approves or vetoes our budget and our laws. So again, I gotta ask, what the hell did Trump take over? If we didn't control the city, who we took it over from? Anyway, that's all I got for tonight. Thank y'all for joining me and hanging out with me for this extra dark room. I'm going to get my little transition stuff together at some point. But today was just like, man, it's great. It's good that I stayed awake long enough to do this show, because I just really wanted to take a nap all day. So that's what I'm gonna do now. I'm gonna have myself some ramen, and I'm gonna have myself a nightcap, and then I'm going to sleep. And we'll see what tomorrow will bring. So until next time, folks, a luta continua. The struggle continues. But if we keep organizing, I promise, it will happen. I don't know when. I really don't know how, but Victoria Acerta. Victory is certain. Peace.